I work for a textile company as a truck driver. It's a company that specializes in sewing. I often have to drive long distances in a 2-ton truck to collect and deliver materials and products to our external sewing company. I want to share with you a story that happened on one of these drives. I was doing a short drive on the day that this experience took place. It only took about 40 minutes to get to the external factory. The drive was pretty tough, to be honest. It's up in the mountains, and the roads are very windy. And what's worse is the sheer drop below, over the guardrail. One wrong move and it could be fatal. Even though the roads were up in the mountains, they were well maintained, because there was always a bit of traffic on those roads. There were 2 lanes in the road, and there was plenty of space despite the frightening drop. I didn't consider the road itself all that dangerous. It happened on a day in late spring. The sky was a beautiful blue color, with no clouds. It was very hot out. I was even sweating while I was sat still. I was in the truck, and I was blasting the air conditioner. I was driving through a portion of the mountain pass where the greenery of the woods was particularly visible. It was really nice to look at. Suddenly I realized that I was feeling very sleepy. I was overwhelmed by an intense feeling of drowsiness. I had been driving a lot, and I guess it all crept up on me. I felt the strength in my arms draining. It was getting harder and harder to keep control of the truck. It was the strangest sensation ever. I knew that I needed to pull over and stop the truck, but I felt as if I was watching myself drive, like I was having some kind of out-of-body experience. I felt powerless. I still had a small degree of power and control over the situation, but it kept coming and going. Eventually, the intervals between control and drowsiness grew too big, and I felt as if my eyelids were getting heavier and heavier. The roar of the aircon faded out. Even though terror had gripped my heart, my head felt nothing. It's so hard to explain. I felt as if I was watching somebody else's experience. I was focusing my mind on pulling over into a rest area. I just kept repeating, "Pull over when it's safe. Pull over when it's safe." What little control I had over the situation was about to slip away from my grasp. I could feel it. Then suddenly, as I was about to lose consciousness, I heard a heavy series of thuds against the driver's side door. It was strong enough to shake the cab. The drowsiness that I had felt a few moments ago was instantly gone. It was like a wave had washed over me. I could hear the aircon, and I had control over the wheel again. Terror was back now. I was very frightened that I had just caused an accident. Or best case scenario, a biker had banged on my door while he saw me kind of swerving. I hoped so much for it to be the latter. I looked in my mirrors and up ahead, but I couldn't see a biker anywhere. So who the hell hit my cab? Oh God, not an animal. Please don't let it be an animal, I thought to myself. I was grateful to be still going down this road with my life intact, but I would hate to learn that it cost an animal's life. I carried on, going up the mountain pass, with all these questions swirling around my head, and after a while, I managed to pull over into a lay-by. Now I had the task of checking over the cab. I really didn't want to see blood or something worse. I checked all over the body of the cab and the truck, but I found nothing. I walked back down the road and looked for any kind of debris, but again, I came up empty-handed. I couldn't see anything in the road which might have caused the sound that I heard. Well, this just blew my mind. I was of course insanely grateful that I hadn't caused an accident and I hadn't killed an animal, but there was no conclusion to what actually happened. I went back to the truck to attempt to gather my thoughts. Something dawned on me at that point. The mountain pass I was on was said to be haunted by the ghost of a driver who passed away in an accident. In fact, there have been many accidents on that particular mountain pass, so there are lots of rumors about it. I did some digging online, and apparently the road was the final resting place of 2 murder victims too. Their bodies were found in some dense brush by the side of the road. I have driven up and down that mountain pass many times, but never saw or experienced anything spooky. But I guess I can't say that anymore. If it wasn't for that experience, I might have crashed or gone over the edge. I'm on top of my sleeping patterns these days. I won't be driving when I'm that tired again. And even though I still feel it was weird that I suddenly got tired, I don't think that was anything paranormal. I just feel like I was burning the candle at both ends at the time. Having said that, the weird kind of out-of-body experience might be something. I do believe that something paranormal happened that day, and I do believe that the banging on my cab was paranormal. I know it sounds a bit out there, but I think that it was the spirit of one of those lost souls the road has claimed, trying to prevent me from joining them. When I think back on this event, all I can say is that I'm grateful. If I drive on the road these days, I always whisper thank you as I pass through the area where the experience took place. Thanks, Ghost, for waking me up. I probably sound mad, but I don't care, I'm still here, thanks to the intervention of the paranormal. Gashadoku, or literally, the rattling skeleton, is a titan of horror said to appear over the fallen. You see it drawn to places of loss like battlefields and other areas where men and women have passed without proper burial rites. Its body is made from the rot and bones of the deceased. Those spirits linger with grudges against the world. It's a giant skeleton made of other skeletons. An apex predator that searches endlessly for victims to add to its ever-growing power. It wanders the world at night, and if anyone is unlucky enough to encounter it, it will lash out. Those who wake and hear the jangling of bones past their windows better not draw back the curtains and look at what's out there, for it might be the Gashadoku. Should the living lay their eyes upon it, it will attack. It will attack and try to add its victim to its growing army of the dead, its sick and twisted conglomeration of rotten meat and bones. The way it attacks is far more frightening than its appearance. It will come after you and attempt to strip away the flesh from your bones. It's not fussy. No part of you will remain, save for your bones to join its growing body. Gashadoku's appearance is said to be inspired or likened to the ukiyo-e artist Kuniyoshi Utagawa. He did a famous picture called Somo no Kodairi. I think you guys would be familiar with this picture if I showed you it, so I'm going to show you it. Here it is on screen now. They say that this thing is over 10 feet tall, even bigger in some instances, and it wanders the earth at 2 a.m. If you hear it coming, that actually isn't as terrible as it potentially sounds. It isn't terrible news, to be honest. It tends to sneak up on the ones it wishes to devour, you see. No one is really certain where the legend comes from. Its image has been prevalent in Japanese history since the ukiyo-e illustrations. However, it probably gained more attention around the 60s and the 70s through various media works, books, comics, etc. Famous artists such as Mizuki Shigeru helped make the Gashadoku popular, I guess. It is interesting to try and figure out where its origins came from. According to the Nihon Ryoiki, in an eastern province of modern-day Hiroshima Prefecture, a man was passing through some empty, open fields centuries ago, and he stopped in his tracks when he heard something strange. He heard a moaning sound, and as he got a bit closer, he thought he could make out some words. It all sounded like an eerie groan, but there were some words amongst the moans, and those words were, "My eyes! Oh God, they hurt! My eyes!" He looked around for a while, but left when he presumed that he was the only one in the field, and he must have been hearing things. You see, it would have been hard to find someone, with it being night out. The following morning, he thought to himself, well, I better pass through that field again in the early morning light, just to see if anyone was out there, hidden by the darkness of night. He approached the area of the field in which he was certain he had heard the groaning sound the loudest, and he looked around. Well, there were no bodies in the area. But there was something that sparked his curiosity. There, on the dry ground, lay a skull. He kneeled down to take a closer look and noticed that there were 2 bamboo shoots beginning to grow through each eye socket of the skull. Based on his superstition, compassion, and what he had heard the night before, he felt that the smartest move he could make would be to move the skull. He took it with him to a shady part of the field and offered it some of his breakfast. The skull, against all odds, began to speak to him and told him of his murder, personal life, and seemed to reward him for his kindness. However, it is uncertain if this legend is linked to the giant skeleton that towers over Japan at night. Back to the darkness of the yokai and other potential theories. The Gashadoku is said to claim the bodies of the poor souls whose final resting place is the Sea of Trees, the Jukai, or also known as Aokigahara. Anyone who left this world with a grudge could find themselves following the giant skeleton. There is a rumor that I've heard, actually, that one kid wandered out into Aokigahara forest and discovered a body. Bones, really. He then urinated on it as a dare. Before you ask, no, this wasn't Logan Paul or his mates, but I wish it was. For the second he did that, a giant amalgamation of bones rose from the dense forest floor, towered over the cowering boy, and tore him apart. Just to end this chapter, I think I've given you the bare bones of this yokai. Apparently its grave, or parts of its body, lies within the Imperial Palace of Tokyo. Well, maybe just the head, according to rumors and legends. It's definitely not out there searching the streets and the wilderness for new victims, so you can sleep in peace tonight. But just keep an ear out for that jangly kind of sound though, right? This happened last August. It's the strangest experience I've ever had. My family went away, leaving me home alone. It was fine, I didn't want to go with them, so it wasn't really an issue. They would be gone for 4 days and 3 nights, so I figured I would just enjoy having the place to myself. I should just go over the layout of the house really quickly. It's a fairly large detached house, the standard 2 stories. The house has been in our family for years. I think my dad inherited or got a good deal on it from a family member. Anyways, there are bathrooms upstairs and down, and since my room is upstairs, I use the upstairs bathroom. By the way, the bathroom will feature heavily in this story. The day that this took place was a regular school day for me. Well, it was supposed to be a regular day, but I forgot that my parents had signed me up for some after-school class, and I ended up staying way later than I wanted to. I left school at about 7:30. It's not that uncommon over here to stay that late. I ended up getting home at around 8 p.m. I thought to myself, hey, even though it's late, I'm all by myself tonight. So I decided to take my time on the walk home. I browsed a couple of stores and it was all fun and games until I felt a gurgle in my stomach. I apologize for being a little gross here, maybe painting pictures you might not want to see, but my struggle is essential to this story, trust me. Anyway, I had about a 1-minute window to find a toilet. I'm a guy and it wasn't like I could just go behind a tree, no, I needed the other one. The one after the number 1 was what I needed. So I literally ran home, clutching my stomach and praying to all the known gods that I didn't run into one of my friends or any of the girls from my school. Luckily enough, I wasn't that far away from home, and I know you're all on the edges of your seats, but I made it inside. I burst into the downstairs toilet, and you know, all hell broke loose. Something crazy happened though, something that shocked me. You know I said that I was alone, right? Well, imagine the shock my body endured when I heard someone banging on the bathroom door. It wasn't a knocking sound, it was someone hammering on the door. I felt like someone was trying to break the door down. I was so busy being frightened, I stopped what I was doing. I could do little more than listen to the sounds of the door being banged on. I kind of backed my way as far back on the throne as I could. I just stared at the door in awe. I didn't really feel fear at first, I just felt shock. I don't know, maybe my experience is unique. And if I was on another kind of chair in a different room, maybe I would have felt more fear than shock. But all I felt was shock. Potentially out of embarrassment. After I guess about a minute, the banging suddenly stopped. There was a brief pause and then someone shouted some expletives in a really loud voice. I couldn't make out what they said, but the voice was undoubtedly male. One thing struck me. Something just kind of kicked in when I heard that voice. The banging then continued. Fear was in the room with me now. I just held my head in my hands and prayed internally. It wasn't a prayer to a deity, just a prayer for my safety, to be left alone, and it went something like this. Occupied. If you really need the bathroom, please just go upstairs. I don't know why I thought of it like that. Maybe it was a little because I had an older brother, and when he wanted to take a shower and I was using the bathroom or something, he would always bang on the door to try and hurry me up. Then, as if my prayers were answered, the banging stopped, and then I heard the rushing of footfall heading upstairs. I couldn't really get my head around what just happened and what was going on, so I sat there in stunned awe, grasping for any kind of logical conclusion. I was very, very reluctant to leave the bathroom. After a while, a long while, I managed to calm myself down. I mean, it wasn't like I could spend the next 3 days in the bathroom. I decided to get out of there. I figured that as soon as I got out, I would burst out of the front door and run to my friend's house. When I got there, I was likely visibly distressed. My friend was concerned for me, and I told him what had happened, and he managed to get his parents to allow me to stay over that night. I made sure to let them know that I was grateful. It was very short notice. I planned on tapping them up to allow me to stay for another night maybe, but his mum told me that they were off for a short holiday the following afternoon. That meant that I had to go home. I thanked my friend and his family again on the following morning, and then reluctantly headed on home. I think my friend must have been annoyed with me, as I'm pretty sure I must have kept him up half the night. I was a bit too scared to sleep, you see. I had to go home and get a change of clothes or at least a shower. And if I left the house empty and I hadn't done all the chores that I was asked to do, then I would be in a world of trouble when my parents got home. I had to go home, and I hated it. The only good thing about this situation was the fact that it was about 3 p.m. when I was heading home. Natural light was good. I couldn't have done it in the dark. I entered my house slowly and carefully. I tried to be as silent as possible. The first thing that stood out to me was my school bag lying there on the hall carpet. I thought about leaving again, but I pushed on. I was debating internally over which situation would have the worst outcome, my parents being mad at me, or confronting whatever was upstairs. I thought about it for a while, and I began to head upstairs. The moment I put my foot on the bottom step of my stairs, my stomach began to gurgle. It was literally 10 times worse than yesterday. I needed to go, and I needed to go immediately. I immediately headed for the downstairs bathroom, and I was shocked to find it locked. This simply couldn't be. This simply couldn't be. I couldn't understand why it would be locked, so I started hammering on the door. I didn't know if it had somehow locked itself. I didn't care, I just needed to get in there very, very quickly. I was literally throwing my shoulder into the door in an attempt to break it down. I screamed at the door a couple of expletives, and in that moment I realized that it was all too familiar. Didn't this happen yesterday? I thought that I should go upstairs and use the bathroom just like what happened yesterday. So, was I the one who was knocking on the bathroom door? What? Was this some kind of glitch in the Matrix? I mean, I've heard of stuff like that before, but they just seem to happen in less intimate settings, you know? The next question I had about 2 seconds to answer before all hell broke loose was, do I really want to go upstairs? Is my future self up there? What was up there? Whatever was happening was putting stress on my body every time it happened, so would it be worth my while Going upstairs to confront it? No way. I don't want to. I decided to suffer the embarrassment of heading over to the neighbor's house and asking them if I could use the bathroom. They asked some questions, but I think the sheer horror on my face convinced them that I needed to go instantly. Permission granted, and then, well, you probably don't want to know. Toilet flushed, just like my expression. I left the neighbor's house. That night I stayed out until the early morning at an all-night restaurant. In the morning, when I got home, I just sat on the curb in front of my house. I just waited like a dog for my parents to come home. And when they got home, I told them everything. And they didn't seem that interested in my claims. They seemed tired and irritable, and I was all like, hello, how do you think I feel? Well, sadly, this is where the experience ends. Nothing like that happened again in our family home. Well, that's as far as I know. Would anybody want to admit all the gross bathroom stuff that I've just admitted? Not sure. It scared the hell out of me. I don't want it to ever happen again, and that's why I'm posting it here. To A, get it off my chest, not like I can tell anybody I know this, and B, see if anyone out there has experienced anything similar. A glitch in the Matrix? Missing time? These concepts become more frightening to me the more I look into them. I read stuff online a lot. Stuff like this. It says, hey, oh my god, I saw a ghost in my apartment yesterday. It was horrifying. I took a photo. Check this out. It looks just like an orb, and look at that mist. I don't smoke, so I don't know how to explain that. Some who can sense the presence of ghosts. Some even say that there's a spirit using them as a vessel to write stories online. Sometimes I think to myself, give me a break. But hey, for all you know, the spirit might be using me as a vessel and forcing my hand right now, huh? The world is full of strange phenomena. I don't know if it's all down to the presence of the paranormal, but I want to share with you my experiences in my last apartment. And if nothing else, it might make me feel a little better. So do me a favor and listen, would you? It wasn't a big apartment. The building only had 2 floors. I moved in not long after it had been built. So it wasn't an old place. It all started one winter's afternoon about 2 years ago. I came home from work that night and headed into the bathroom. I noticed something weird. I always leave the bathroom window open, no matter what, winter or summer. It's good to have air circulating. Now this window, it was one of those that you could open outward, you know, like a hopper window. Once that thing was open, it would take some weight to close it. The window faced outwards, but there was a screen shutter over it. So if you wanted to shut my window from the outside, you would need to unscrew the shutter, close the window, then screw the shutter back in. Sounds like it wouldn't be worth it, right? I checked the screws on the shutter. I thought, why not? But I found that there were no signs of tampering. I thought that it was weird, but I just decided to leave it. I opened the window and went on with my night, with the assumption that I closed it and forgot about it. I came home from work on the following night, and to my surprise, I noticed that the bathroom window was closed again. I was sure that it wasn't me being forgetful this time. I literally stood out there and said, I opened you last night. Why are you closed? I was sure, very sure that the window was open when I left for work. I remember looking over at it and thinking about the window being shut the night before. I felt really creeped out all of a sudden. I was very aware that I was alone, but my hair stood on end. Funny what a closed window can do to someone, right? I had dinner in the kitchen, and I couldn't get the window off of my mind. I knew I would have to be in the bathroom later for my bath, and due to some muscle pain, I really wanted to take a bath. I decided after a little while to not allow a window in the bathroom to have so much control over me and my night, so I stormed in there, and I ran myself a bath. There had to be a reasonable, logical answer, I thought to myself. I just couldn't find it yet. This is unusual for apartments in my price range, but my bathroom was pretty big. It was nice. When I got ready for a bath, I noticed something in the corner of my eye. Something dark, up high. I looked up and noticed that there was a hole in the ceiling. No, to be more precise, it was as if a panel in the bathroom ceiling had been opened and left ajar. It was like a lid or some kind of hatch. I didn't really pay attention to it before. The hole inside was pitch black and about 50 centimeters in diameter. I decided to close the lid of that panel and skip taking a bath that night. I wondered how long that hatch had been opened for, and if it was open yesterday. I couldn't get it off my mind, and I had a really rough night of sleep. I decided to get up and take a flashlight into the bathroom and look into the bathroom attic panel hatch thing. I dragged a chair in from the lounge and stood on it. I was really glad to see that the hatch wasn't open when I went back in the bathroom. I stood there considering things, trying to motivate myself to open the panel, and after a brief moment I took the plunge and opened it. I illuminated the hole with my flashlight. I looked up there and there was nothing really there. In fact, I wasn't even sure why my bathroom needed this weird little ceiling space. I saw the metal divider that blocks the attic space into the next apartment, but nothing else. It was like a secret little space, but what was the purpose of the space? It wasn't the last time this happened. It was so weird. Whenever the window is shut, the little hatch in the attic/bathroom opens. I really hate it. It scares the hell out of me, and I have no idea what is causing it or what it means. It really creeps me out every time I see that hatch open and the window shut. It's like there's something in my apartment. I would have superglued it shut, but I was renting. I didn't want to tell the landlord because he would have thought that I was insane. I mean, all that's happened is a panel opening and a window closing. It's hardly anything frightening, right? Well, that is what I thought until some other strange happenings occurred in my apartment. One night, a friend of mine was over, and we were up late having a good time. Eventually, we said our goodnights, and he was on his way. As I was sat at my desk, I heard a loud sneeze that was definitely a male sneeze. I didn't hear it coming from outside of the apartment. It sounded like it came from inside. I was certain that it didn't come from the guy next door as well. Moments after the sneeze, I felt this strange feeling. It felt as if I was drowning or being smothered. It was all cold and strange, but somehow, to me, it suddenly felt funny. So my fear for the situation I was in quickly went away. It was really weird. That's when I was convinced that something was going on that I didn't know anything about. I lived in that apartment while I was at college, and I felt as if there was an earthquake occurring every single day. I was convinced, but apparently I was the only person in my class who could feel the tremors. I would ask anyone I knew on campus questions like, "We've been having a lot of earthquakes recently, haven't we?" And people didn't know what the hell I was talking about. It made me really paranoid. Once I had a friend round to my apartment, and I felt the ground shaking, and I said to my friend, now you know what I'm talking about. Did you feel that? And he replied, "No, not really." I was shocked. I told myself maybe he didn't notice it because it was a very small tremor, but I knew that I felt it, so it felt like a flimsy excuse. The quakes continued for about a year. They drove me insane and made me feel so paranoid. Was it that I was the only one experiencing them, or was I the only one who was talking about them? I met a fresher one afternoon, and we spoke for a while. We instantly hit it off, and I felt comfortable mentioning the issues that I had been having with the quakes. She went quiet and looked at me and said, "It's happening to me too." She said that she felt the quakes every day. She lived alone, and her apartment was a little ways away from mine. Our lifestyles were pretty similar, actually. We were very similar in a lot of ways. One thing that we did note about our homes was about halfway between them, there was a JMSDF, the Japanese Military Self-Defense Force. They had a base there, about halfway between our houses, and we joked to one another that they might be conducting secret military experiments underground. Now, we never got to the bottom of it, but sometimes I wonder if that little joke of ours had a tiny bit of truth to it. I hope the things which happened to us weren't some secret experiments. But it makes me a little more scared of that hatch when I consider the possibilities. This one is a bit of an urban legend. You guys forced my hand and I had to trawl the net to find a scary story about eggs. Eggs? I guess they do make good paperweights though if you go to Paddy's Pub. Anyway, I hope you like this, but with all egg-related dishes, take this with a pinch of salt inside the eggs. This is a story I heard from a police officer friend of mine. Do you remember that dismemberment case, which happened in Saitama a few years back? Well, my cop friend worked that case. You know the one, right? It was all over the news. A dismembered body was found in a young woman's apartment. It was so out of the blue, especially in that part of the country. I mean, nothing really ever happened there. The worst case before that, in that area of Saitama, that my cop buddy had to deal with, was the case of the stolen bicycle. It came right out of left field. Obviously, I can't go too far into the splattery details. Well, I don't know, if I keep all parties anonymous, maybe I can. I'm just speaking out loud here, stay with me, I have something to tell you, I promise. We're gonna have to make up some fake names here. We got Eiko and Kazuki. Eiko is a woman, Kazuki is a guy. Both of their mothers were childhood friends, so it seemed inevitable that the two kids would be in each other's lives. Their mothers wished them to be best friends. They went to the same elementary, middle school, and high school. Naturally, Eiko and Kazuki became friends quite quickly, and Eiko began a relationship with Kazuki's friend, Sakaki. Next, they chose to continue their educations at university. Luckily, they all got into the same university. However, sadly, Sakaki passed away. During a date with Eiko, he fell into a dam. They had driven out into a secluded area, and some rumors say that they were messing around walking alongside the dam. No one but Eiko knows what happened, since there were only two of them there. Eiko, well, she was a wreck after that. It must have been horrible. After a while, she stopped being seen on campus, and a while later, she stopped going to college altogether. Before too long, she refused to leave the house. Everyone looked on her and her family with eyes full of pity, and who knows, maybe that was reason enough for her not to want to be seen in public. I mean, she didn't become hikikomori. She was still bathing, still eating outside of her room, and still using the bathroom. The only thing that changed was her ability to hold a conversation. If you pressed her, or tried to force her into speaking, then you would feel her wrath. She would yell and act out with violence. Eiko's dad didn't want to bring attention to his daughter's plight. He refused to take her to the doctor or even to the hospital. Even though he claimed that there was nothing wrong with his daughter, he stopped going up to see her in her bedroom, and she became gradually less seen around the house. He just let her grow progressively disassociative. Her mother didn't know what to do or who to turn to, so she asked Kazuki to come and pay her a visit. He was more than eager to lend his hand to help. He would often go up and visit. For Eiko, he was the only person who was allowed to stay in her room for extended periods. It was a great arrangement. Her mother got to see her daughter smile, and she noticed a minor shift in her behaviors. She gained weight. This was a good thing. Eiko had been eating like a sparrow since she became withdrawn. One thing that everybody knew about Eiko was the fact that she was really good with her hands. You know, making crafts and stuff like that. She had taken to making crafts with eggs. It was as if she was obsessed with making these egg creations. It came out of the blue. She just asked her mum to bring her eggs, like about a dozen a week. Because of her lack of communication, no one knew why she went after eggs. No one knew why she would race to the egg carton when her mother came back from the store. She just did. What did she do with the eggs, though? Well, she would crack the shell without fully breaking the structural integrity of the egg, and then she would drain the fluid from the egg, wash the egg inside and out to her best ability. Then she would glue pieces of fine fabric around the eggs, I guess as a decoration. Then she'd tie a string and hang it from the curtain rail. Pretty weird though, or creative. She began to do it every single day. It was the only thing that kept her calm and content. When there was no space on her curtain rail, she would hang her egg decorations from the ceiling with thumbtacks. It was as if she was collecting them for something, planning something, you know? There were so many of these eggs that her curtains couldn't be drawn shut at night. Her bedroom was littered with these egg decorations. Things changed from this point quite dramatically. One day, Eiko's mother noticed something. She was wrong in her previous assumptions. Her daughter hadn't gained weight. She was pregnant. Eiko's mother, unsure of what to do, contacted her best friend, Kazuki's mother. They talked it over the phone, and Kazuki overheard, or his mum told him, about it afterwards. He went to stay with a friend that night, and apparently for a few more nights. From that point, a theory was quickly proven correct. Kazuki was the father. Kazuki had gotten Eiko pregnant. He had confessed to one of his friends that he had gotten her pregnant, if the rumors around town were to be believed. That's where he headed that night. He was staying with the friend he had confessed to. They spoke all night. One thing that Kazuki was repeatedly stating was the fact that he was overjoyed to be a father, and he would do everything he could to make it work. And with that, he left his friend's house with a new attitude, ready to go. However, that was the last time anyone saw Kazuki alive. After a couple of days, his dismembered remains were found in the last place anyone would look. Eiko's bedroom. His remains were found by Eiko's mother. However, they weren't noticed instantly. Well, how could that possibly be? Let's just say it wasn't easy to detect. Let me explain. Eiko was found sleeping, and all around her, all of her egg decorations were shattered and broken. It was as if she had torn them from the ceiling and the curtain rail. What struck her before she noticed the destruction in her daughter's room was the smell. It was pungent. Eiko, however, seemed unaware of this smell. She seemed to be sleeping soundly in her bed without disturbance. She looked exhausted. Eiko's mother was unable to locate the source of the smell. This is kind of gross, but her mum had thought that she had had her monthly visit and was no longer pregnant, and perhaps this brought on the trashing of her room. Eiko's mother was relieved that she wasn't pregnant. She wandered over to the window to open it, to allow in some fresh air. She noticed that there was an abundant number of eggs wrapped in cloth by the foot of the window. Eiko had been busy with her creations. Eiko's mother tried to avoid touching them as she didn't want to crack them or wake her daughter up. However, she did brush aside one of them and felt that the egg had a strange, kind of unusual weight, a new center of balance. The odor seemed to grow a little stronger. When she nudged that egg, she timidly squatted down and made a closer inspection. There was something wrong. There was some dark reddish stain on the fabric. It looked as if it had leaked out from the egg. It looked like blood. It looked, to Eiko's mother, exactly like the blood that had seeped from her own knee when she cut it last summer. The way it had stained the fabric and dyed it a dark red was nostalgic and horrifying. Didn't Eiko take a particular interest to that injury? She wondered, absent-mindedly. Eiko's mother let out an involuntary scream. Her husband was downstairs. If he reacted, no one noticed. He didn't raise his voice out of concern nor irritation. Eiko's mum rushed to the bed and dragged her daughter out of it. Eiko's clumsy, freshly woken footfall crushed some of her egg creations. The stench grew. Eiko's mother led her downstairs, and at the sight of both of them, Eiko's father turned away and headed into the bedroom. Eiko was unresponsive. Her mother sat her in an armchair in the living room and called the cops. One key phrase she repeated to the officer was, "I don't want to know what's inside those eggs." The police arrived. They were nearby, as they had a report in the area. The police officer headed upstairs, and my friend, the guy who told me all about this, he headed up there and found an unknown number of cracked and whole eggs. Naturally, he was shocked and found it a little odd when the stench of that room hit his nostrils. He almost retched. He looked at the floor, which was littered with eggshells, and found one that looked as if it had been freshly cracked. Leaking from the split in the egg wasn't what you might expect. It was a human eyeball. I'm sure you might have guessed it by now, but in all these eggs, which Eiko had broken, cleaned, reassembled and covered up in fabric, was the remains, in very small pieces, of Kazuki, chopped into an innumerable amount of pieces, and hidden in Eiko's craftwork. No testimony was ever received from Eiko. She offered no confession, reasoning, nor motive. She told no one of how the hell she could do that to another human being, let alone the father of her unborn son. She told no one of a method either. How do you dismember a body in such a way that you can put the pieces inside eggs covered in fabric? Her mother and father didn't suspect a thing. The working motive that the police had created along with the rumors around town was that Eiko resented the fact that Kazuki had gotten her pregnant. However, there are so many moving pieces and missing pieces to this story. I don't even want to figure it out. How do you mash up bone so fine that it fits into an eggshell? It's so hard to believe that it was just 1 or 2 nights of work from Eiko. Or maybe I should say butchering, not work. Eiko is in an asylum now. I never heard about what happened to her or her child after that. There is no real ending, but everyone around my town always asks one question when the drinks start to flow or the dark nights come in early. How did she do it? How did she put all of his body parts into eggshells, and why? We will never know. Hope you had fun, everybody. More scary, true stories coming. Thanks for listening.